Hey guys, Miss Harris here. For our first week of e-learning, we are really just going to be focusing on the story elements, okay? So, no, in these book clubs, we're not going to read just one book. We are going to focus on several short stories, okay? And so, our first short story is going to be The Monkey's Paw. And you're really only going to have to read that one time, but you're going to use that same text and you're going to practice several different skills with it this week, okay? And so what we're going to do is we're actually going to focus on just looking at these story elements while we read, okay? So we're going to look at the setting, characters, plot, conflict, and the solution, okay? So really, for today, what I want us to do is just look at the setting and the characters, okay? So when I say the setting, I mean where and when the story takes place. And our characters are who the story is about and what are they like, okay? And so here's our skill that we're practicing for today, okay? It says, I can describe the character and setting. And our strategy is we're just going to focus on trying to paint a perfect picture, okay? Not literally, we're actually sort of literally, because we are going to do some drawing, okay? But when I say paint a perfect picture, it's really like using both a drawing to picture something, but also using words to describe something to where someone else can actually picture it. Okay, it's sort of like when somebody tells you about a person and they're trying to get you to remember who they are, so they just keep describing them and describing them and describing them. No, remember they got the blonde hair and they talk like this, and they give you all of these different features until you actually can picture in your mind what they look like. Okay, so we're actually going to do that with the setting, and then for our characters, we're just going to use descriptive language to kind of describe or paint a picture of their personality, okay? So, here's our process, okay? Number one, you need to read The Monkey's Paw, okay? Number two, we're gonna focus on how the author describes the setting. Okay, because in any good book, they're really going to take some time to just describe where and when something takes place in some really good detail. Okay, now after you read where they described it in detail, I want you to picture it in your mind and then draw it. Doesn't need to be perfect, but I want you to draw a picture of it to the best of your ability. Okay, next, you are going to look at the main characters of the story, okay? And I really want you to think about what actions do they take and what words do they say, okay? And your job is to ask yourself, what kind of person does that, okay? It's almost like you're judging them again. You're just going to ask yourself what kind of person does that, and then you're going to find a word to describe that kind of person, okay? So you're going to use that descriptive language, and you're going to describe what kind of person they are, okay? So I'm going to model for you guys what that looks like. And my text for that is going to be Girl Stolen, okay? So, I remember the first thing I need to do is read, obviously, but I'm going to focus on right now how the author describes the setting, okay? There we go. Said, literally this entire story takes place in a Cadillac Escalade right now. So really, I'm just looking for where they describe the Escalade, because I can't really picture, okay, well I can because I've seen an Escalade, but I want more detail so I can actually draw it, okay? So obviously it's brand new because it says the Escalade had been a gift, a surprise present meant just for him. Anyone who was stupid enough to leave the keys dangling from the ignition in full view of the world deserved to have the car taken anyway. And he couldn't wait to bring it home and present it to Roy. Okay, that's what Griffin had thought anyway, until the blanket in the back seat turned out to have a girl underneath it. okay? So in my mind, I'm literally picturing an Escalade. I don't know what color because they didn't tell me, okay? But the keys are dangling from the ignition. There's a blanket in the back and a girl under it. So, no judgments. I'm going to try and draw this really, really quickly, okay? I'm starting to feel like this is looking more like a Buick. But you know what? That doesn't matter. Oh, yeah. That's a house door. Okay. Yep. Let's see. Here's the ignition. And there's the keys. And another window. There's the blanket. And let me just put some hair. Because there's a girl. Okay? So, I just drew to the best of my ability, okay, a Cadillac Escalade with the keys dangling from the ignition and a blanket in the back with a girl underneath, okay? So now my next step is to look at the main characters of the story and really look at some of the actions they take and the words that they say, okay? So, right away, oh, and we do have the girl's name, Cheyenne. All right, where was it? All right, a swear word, a guy's voice. She had already halfway known that it was a guy, the way she sometimes just knew things now. Who the heck are you? His voice broke in surprise. What are you doing in Danielle's car? Their words collided and tangled, both of them speaking too fast, almost yelling. Sitting up, she scrambled back against the door, the one farthest from here. Stop our car and get out. No, he shouted back. The engine surged as he drove faster. Cheyenne realized she was being kidnapped, but she couldn't see the guy who was kidnapping her or where they were going, because for the last 3 years, Cheyenne had been blind. Okay, so we have our guy. And that is Mr. Griffin. And then we have our girl, Cheyenne. Okay? So now, the first action that I'm seeing is that Griffin just stole her car and is essentially kidnapping Cheyenne right now. Okay? So what kind of person does that? Obviously, a criminal. So, criminal, okay? And then I'm going to really focus on what else he does and says, okay, that shapes him, even though I do know that he is already a criminal, okay? Let's keep going. Maybe we can find out some more about Cheyenne. Okay, so it says, she froze, wondering how much the blanket covered her. She couldn't feel it on the top of her head. Cheyenne felt like a mouse. She had been seen in the kitchen one time when she had turned on the light before school. Caught in the middle of the floor, it had stood stock still, like maybe she wouldn't notice if it didn't move. But it hadn't worked for the mouse, and now it didn't work for Cheyenne. So it says she froze. I'm starting to think that, like, right now, she's obviously scared. Like, literally frozen. She doesn't really know what to do right now. Okay? As soon as he slowed down, the girl came at him. Outstretched hands, curved into claws, screaming like a banshee. Her head was cocked to one side, and her eyes were wide and staring. She looked crazy. Maybe she was. Throwing the car into park, Griffin tried to deflect her, raising his shoulder and turning his head. At least no one was around to hear her. Her fingernails raked down his right cheek, and he could feel she had drawn blood. Ooh! Oh, she is a wild child. Okay. So she's not just sitting there now. She's fighting back. Okay. So I'm going to say she is just brave. Okay. Fighting back is the kind of thing that a brave person does. Okay. So notice how I just looked at something she did. And then I just said, what kind of person does that thing? Okay. So I have 2 traits for her. Let me see if I can find one more for Griffin, okay? Now, he says, he exhaled. Look, it's an accident you're here. I just wanted the car, not you. I didn't even know you were in the car. Okay? So when he says that, I start to feel like, okay, maybe he's not a bad guy. Maybe he's being, a little sympathetic. Okay, so he's a criminal. Smidgen of a heart? Possibly. We don't really know yet. I don't know if it's got too much. We're just going to put sympathetic for now. Okay? And let's keep going. Okay? So then at the end of this chapter it says, then he had an idea. He didn't know if it would work, but he had to do something. Desperately, he groped across the passenger seat until his fingers closed on what he needed. Griffin pressed the barrel against her temple. Shut up, or I'll shoot you. So, I would erase sympathetic, but I'm going to leave it because I really did think he was being sympathetic at one point. Okay, so we'll leave that as a character trait. But he says, shut up or I'll shoot you. So what kind of person does that? We already know he's a criminal. So I'm going to also put forceful. Okay, because I feel like that's a really good word to describe him and his actions in that moment. Okay? And so if you guys struggle with finding words to describe what kind of person they are, so think of a really, really basic word to describe them. And then on your iPad, go ahead and then search up some synonyms. Okay? And those synonyms, you can just pull any of those like words that are similar to that, and you can use those to describe the character. Okay? So in this process, I just read, looked at the setting, and then pictured in my mind and drew it. Okay? I also looked at the main characters of the story and what actions and words they said. And I asked myself, what kind of person does that? And described what kind of person they are. Okay? So that is exactly what I want for you to do. Maybe a little neater than I did. But really put this skill into practice, okay? And if you have any questions, go ahead and you can just email me, okay? Email me and I will answer those as soon as possible, okay? So hopefully this was helpful for you, and I can't wait to see what you guys create.